A government major, class of 2027. Based on how we felt. Okay, terrific. Joseph, take it away.
Fourscore and 7 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Abraham Lincoln spoke these words on November 19, 1863, before a small crowd in the middle of the American Civil War. It was our nation's darkest hour. Families, neighbors, and friends were fractured across the country, our national identity obfuscated by the shadow of war. In the wake of the bloodiest battle ever fought on American soil, where over 50,000 men lost their lives in just 3 days of fighting, Lincoln didn't villainize the Southern secessionists. He didn't turn a moment of collective grief into a rallying cry for polarization. Instead, he articulated a vision for the nation's future tethered to its historic past. A new nation conceived in liberty. Lincoln returned to that liberal notion penned by Jefferson in the Declaration of Independence. One so bold, it inspired hundreds of thousands of colonists to lay down their lives in the formation of a society they believed would outlive them. No divine reward was assured to the fallen. All they carried was the radical hope that liberty could triumph over tyranny. That audacious belief, imagined by a few decent men and carried by ordinary patriots, willed a ragtag colonial army to defeat the greatest empire on earth. That hope that the world could be different, could be better than it is, led not only to the founding of the United States, but set off a wave of revolutions that reshaped the world. And as Lincoln stood in the bloody fields of Gettysburg, the great American democratic experiment teetering on the brink of collapse, he returned to that tradition of liberty. Lincoln understood, however, that liberty is not an end in itself. No. It is achieved through the active and sustained dedication to the proposition that all men are created equal. Liberty is achieved through equality. A truth Americans too often forget when building walls feels easier than building community, but one affirmed in the identical language of both Jefferson and Lincoln. Our nation was conceived in liberty, but for millions of Black Americans, that conception was nothing more than a fictitious dream, a promise still unborn, chained by the cruelty of slavery. It was that broken promise that the Civil War sought to repair. That same promise that Lincoln carried into Gettysburg, daring an infant nation to finally live up to the ideals that conceived it. And though we've come a long way since 1863, the story of America has never been a straightforward ascent toward justice. Time and again, we have fallen short of those ideals. Jim Crow replaced slavery, and new forms of domination still chain the promise of liberty today, in our prisons, at our borders, and in our hearts. There will always be backsliding in the face of progress. There will always be moments when it feels like hope is lost, when what it is to be an American becomes more about preserving exclusivity rather than the ideals that millions before us believed in, fought for, and died for. We face such a moment today, when what it is to be free is a privilege rather than an inalienable right. When compromise feels impossible and our government threatens to crack under the weight of division. But when hope thins and the horizon darkens, Lincoln reminds us that light can be found by returning to our beginnings, by returning to liberty. That is the great task remaining before us, to widen the circle of equality and breathe life into the promise of liberty for all. Each generation inherits this mission, because work in the name of freedom is never finished. The fight didn't end at Gettysburg, nor at Appomattox. It marched in Selma. It sat in lunch counters in Greensboro, and it protested in the streets of DC just a few weeks ago, declaring that in this nation, no power stands above liberty. And that work must continue today. and every demand for dignity and fairness. Every time we remember that freedom is not a gift from the powerful, but a covenant renewed by the courage of ordinary citizens who refuse to let the words of our founders become hollow. Lincoln called on a fractured nation to ensure that a government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from the earth. That call still echoes today. The lesson of Gettysburg, of the Declaration, and of America itself is that liberty lives only so long as we are willing to fight for it. Thank you.